Hello and welcome to this episode of Trash to Track. In this episode we're going to be looking at this Hornby Gordon Loco that has been given to me to repair by my friend Lorna. Now externally it doesn't appear to be in too bad a condition. The front non-driven part there is rolling freely, although it is missing a front buffer. So I'm going to stick him on the track now and give him a quick test to see if he's actually a runner or not. This is the later style Gordon with the two types of pickups on the tender drawbar. But applying a fresh battery to the track, there is no movement whatsoever. There doesn't appear to be any signs of life from Gordon at all. So we're going to have to take him apart and see if we can get him running. That's what I meant by the later style of drawbar. You can see the two types of pickup there, although the top set is quite badly bent. So we're going to have to dismantle the tender here. I'm just having a look at the underframe there because there are a couple of paint chips. But to take the body off, it's a simple clip fit, so gentle pressure will allow the body shell to be removed. And this reveals the later style Ringfield motor, and it's a 5-pole motor. It's also fitted with tender pickups, which despite what many people say, do actually help current collection, as I will attempt to prove to you later on. To remove the motor, you just simply unclip it. However, Hornby have let themselves down in this, and that all wires are soldered from the pickup to the motor. So I can't actually separate the two without unscrewing or desoldering all these parts. I'm now removing the screws that hold the brushes in place. So I gently undo the screws, holding the plates down, otherwise the springs will pop out. Once both screws are removed, you can remove the brush keeper plate, and the springs and brushes should come away. Now one of them does, but as usual one of the brushes is actually stuck in the motor housing there, so we're going to have to strip that down to release that later on. The brushes don't look to be in too bad a condition. They're slightly oily and gunky, so we'll have to give those a clean. And all in all, it just looks like it needs a general service and cleanup. Those tender pickups, although fitted, are looking a little bit crude. So to remove the motor faceplate, what I have to do is, using a small flat bladed screwdriver, or indeed any sort of small implement. Now I have this blunt scalpel that I use, and I use it very gently, just to pare off the motor keeper plate there from the motor block itself. And you also have to remove that middle wheel, as that will hold the base of the motor keeper plate in place. So working gently not to damage any of the clips that hold it in place. I'm trying to remove it there, and then I realise that obviously this wheel has to come off. Surprising the wheels off gently like I normally do revealed another surprise, that the wheel came off but the cog didn't. It stayed on the axle, and I've never had that happen before, so we'll have to repair that later as well. And now you can see the armature, and you can clearly see that it's a 5-pole motor and it spins really freely. So this model is just going to hopefully need a good service to get him back on track. To clean the armature, my usual method, as you've probably seen before, is a cotton bud with methylated spirits to clean most of the gunk off. Any harder grime that's on there, I use a fiberglass pencil just to polish up the face of the armature. And then I use a cocktail stick to clean out the gaps in between the commutator plate there, just to make sure that any carbon buildup has been removed. Now I'm going to give the motor plate a clean up, because there's quite a lot of old lubrication on this, and the grease Hornby use has got a tendency to go like earwax if you're not careful, so I'm going to remove all that. And now I'm going to refit the motor faceplate. It really was as simple as that. Now that the commutator is all clean, I'm going to have to try and push this cog back into the wheel there. It does fit in with 3 plastic lugs. It just appears that the glue has come undone over time, allowing them to become separate. I could have left it off, because this middle wheel actually is a floating wheel and doesn't aid in the traction of this model at all. So cleaning off the axle there, I'm just going to put it in, and then it's a friction fit to fit the other wheel. Although getting a cotton bud and mess again, I'm just going to clean around that wheel, because there was a little bit of hair and gunk still stuck to it. Now I'm going to remove the cogs, and to do that you have to remove this brass keeper. It just pops off these two lugs and then pulls out of the clip holder at the top there, and this allows the gears to be removed, and I will clean all this up, removing all the old lubrication and, as you'll see here, wrapped up fibres and hairs on the gear spindles, which is not uncommon with these models. Obviously Hornby Thomas and Friends models have been used by children, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if this model has got some mileage down on a carpet. So now they've all been cleaned, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove the other two wheels very gently. And I do this by just prising one of the wheels off with a small flat bladed screwdriver there, because I need to clean around these pickups, around the wheels, and also I need to oil the axles. So using a cotton bud and mess, you can see the dirt coming off there on the end of that cotton bud. It is quite dirty, although not overly so. It's nowhere near the worst Loco I've ever worked on. And the gears also get a clean up with the cotton bud and mess, as there was quite a lot of old oil and grease on these gears. But apart from that, they're in very good condition, and there are no burrs or anything present on them, so they don't need a sanding down or anything like that. So I've just got this footage speed up a bit there, just to show you the process of cleaning all the gears and cogs. And then also don't forget to clean this keeper plate, as this can harbour quite a lot of grease and grime, as you can see on the back there. A cotton bud of meths will remove most of it. If there's any stubbornness, use a bit of Brasso or your fiberglass pencil. And now, before reassembly, I'm just going to put a small amount of silicone grease on all of those gear spindles so that they are correctly lubricated. And also put some grease on that middle worm cog there, so that when the motor runs, it spreads it through the entire drivetrain. So using a cocktail stick, as you can see, very sparingly, using some silicone grease. The cogs then fit on by putting the smaller two on the lower spindles, and the double cog goes face down onto the next spindle and connects all the cogs together. And then you can put that motor retaining clip in, which does go in one way, and that is with the clip at the top facing upwards. That simply fits in that die cast hole and back onto the spigots, and then you turn the motor with your finger to make sure everything is aligned correctly. As this model has got tender pickups, I'm going to clean and polish all the wheel backs and wheel treads whilst the wheels are out of the chassis block. On non-tender pickup models you don't have to do this, and on this one particular wheel the build-up of dirt was actually quite bad. I had to resort to polishing it off with the fiberglass pencil. Once that's done, I just put a small amount of oil inside the bearings there. That one on the left, the oil came out a bit quick, so I just got the excess away with a cotton bud. Slide the axles through those brass bearings and then replace the wheels. One thing you won't see on the footage is after I've done this, I do check the wheel back-to-backs with my digital calipers to make sure that the gauging is correct. Now that the brushes and springs have been cleaned, I'm going to replace these back into the motor housing there. One brush and then a spring. Hornby brushes go in one way. They do have a small nobule on the top where the brush spring sits over to hold everything in place. Once that's in, I'm going to replace those two screws and the brush holders. As I said earlier, and I've heard other people mention, having everything soldered together like this, although it does prove extremely reliable electrical connection, it doesn't help for maintenance at all, as everything moves in one piece. So lining up those two locating lugs there, I put the brush holders back in place and then replace the two screws. So now I'm just connecting some power leads from my controller just to make the motor spin. By doing this, it spreads the lubrication through the drivetrain and proves that the motor is nice and free running and that all the traction wheels are lined up. With the motor spinning, I'm now going to polish the wheel treads on the pickup side, followed by a cotton bud and meths just to clean off any excess again. I just want to make sure that all the wheels on this model are sparkling clean to aid in electrical conductivity. The middle wheels on the motor block are cleaned by hand, as they're not turned by the motor turning. They don't turn when you apply power. They are just a set of floating wheels. So now, to put any doubts to bed about the benefits of tender pickups with traction tied wheels, here you'll see the motor block running on its own. There we go, look. So anybody that had any doubts as to whether or not pickup, whoops, I didn't mean to run it off the end of the track there. But anybody that's got any doubts that whether tender pickups are worth it, I hope that demonstration there proves that they certainly are. Now I'm going to replace the motor block back into the chassis plate here, and to do that you have to locate this plastic clip at the front correctly, and then the ring filled motor simply clips in place, aligning all the clips up, and then just gentle finger pressure pressing it down until it clips in place. And that's the motor serviced. I mean, that was a bit loose at the top there because I hadn't pushed it quite fully home. These tenders with the separate plastic lug there can be quite difficult to reassemble. And again, just giving it some encouragement there, you can see that the tender pickups are working fine. Now, if you can get a traction tied motor block to run on its own like that, you can't tell me that tender pickups are not worth it on the traction tied wheels. The tender body shell was in very good condition. All this needed was a bit of a clean up with a paintbrush. And then this was clipped back in place by simply lining it up correctly, and then just gentle downward pressure will clip it into place. And Gordon's tender, he says, when he gets it back on, Gordon's tender is now fully serviced and working. So I'm just going to do a quick battery test on the connecting lug and the pickup wheel, and the motor is spinning, so that's good. So now we'll turn our attention to Gordon himself and have a look at the body shell and the locomotive. The body shell is quite dusty, so I'm going to dust that off with this paintbrush. But again, like the tender, he's in generally good condition, although he is missing a buffer on the front. And luckily enough, I do have plenty of these as spares. So I just dug one out, and it's a simple push fit to complete the front of Gordon's look. He looks quite happy about it too. Now, to remove Gordon's Loco pickup wheels, you have to invert the model, and there is a screw to release it at the front there. As I said before, this model is very free running. There doesn't appear to be any side rods catching, so it's not been mistreated too badly. And removing that screw allows the chassis to be gently prized out, and you can see the two wires there. So this is all wheel pickup on the front here, all driving wheel pickup, not just one-sided. So there should be plenty of electrical contact to that motor. I'm going to give it a good dusting over, as there are quite a few dust fibres on that inside here. And now I'm going to invert it upside down and remove first the rear pony truck. And be careful when doing this, as there is a spacing washer there. Do not lose that, as you will need that later. And remove the front pony truck as well, just so that I can remove the chassis keeper plate, because one of the screws goes through the chassis keeper plate. Removing that reveals the pickup assembly, which is very good for this model. It's none of that stupid push fit pickups that Hornby use. These are all riveted in place, which is good, although they are very dirty with fluff. And another good thing to note is that all the driving wheels are fitted with correct, proper brass bearings. So with a cotton bud of mess, I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to clean all the old lubrication off the axles and bearings. And I'm also going to clean all the pickups. And interestingly, one of the pickups on this model, the chemical blackening they use on these to provide insulation, had actually gone over the end. It hadn't been manufactured correctly, so I scraped this off with a blunt scalpel. Once everything was cleaned up, I'm just going to add a very small amount of oil onto those axles, as we've removed all the previous lubrication, as I've said before. Give the wheels a quick spin and then reassemble the chassis. I put the pickup plate back in, ensuring that all the pickups are in line with the wheels. Do not force a pickup plate down, as you could end up breaking the actual brass pickups, as they're very thin. The front bogie wheel here has obviously collected the most of the dirt in its lifetime, and in fact there was so much carbon buildup on this I actually had to scrape it off with a cocktail stick, as that horrible black stuff I'm sure that all model railway users are familiar with had gathered on these two front wheels. Once that was all cleaned up, this was reassembled back to the chassis using the screws we took out earlier on. And then Gordon's Loco chassis, the pickup section, is then all done. And it's a simple case of refitting that rear clip and then pushing it down at the front and reinserting that small screw we took out earlier on. And that bit's reassembled. One last job to do. Oh, there's a couple of last jobs, sorry, before we finish with this. I put Gordon in the Loco cradle just for ease of handling. And by turning the front wheels manually, I'm going to polish up all of those drive wheels that pick up electricity. First using a fiberglass pencil again, and then a cotton bud with meths. And don't forget, if you ever attempt this, to also clean the wheel backs, as they do need to be cleaned, as obviously the pickups press on these parts of metal. Now that's all clean, I'm just going to put a very, very small amount of oil on Gordon's linkages, just to ease in running. And then we're going to put him on the track to see if our overhaul and service has brought Gordon back to life. I noticed earlier that these two brass pickup things here had been bent out of shape, so using my needle nose pliers, I'm just going to bend these back into the correct position where they should be, and this will ensure that they're pushing on the tender pickup plate when we connect the two together. Just going to give them a quick clean there as well, just to make sure everything's clean. And now Gordon's on the track, all ready to go. And to my surprise, he doesn't work. There is no signs of life from Gordon at all. I don't like these tender engines, they're quite stubborn. But no, there's nothing at all, and this was quite puzzling, as obviously the motor runs really nicely without being connected. So I clean up the pickup plate and the tender drawbar, which also conducts electricity. But then I have a look at the actual tender drawbar itself and find that it's actually bent downwards. It's suffered some damage in the past. So using very gentle finger pressure, because I don't want to break anything, I just push the tender drawbar up slightly to bend it so it's facing upwards. As you can see here, it is now in the correct position and it is straight, whereas before it was drooping down. And because it was facing downwards, those two prongs at the top were touching the pin on the tender, causing a short circuit. But now that it's correctly fitted, and I must admit that is one hell of a gap between the Loco and the tender there. If I owned this model, I'd look at shortening that gap somehow. But now I've moved the tender drawbar so the prongs are where they should be, and then I test Gordon. Gordon runs very nicely and is actually a very smooth and powerful runner. And in my opinion, he does look quite handsome in this nice light blue livery of the Sodor Railway. I'm pleased we've managed to reactivate Gordon and repair him, ready to go back to his owner. If you've got a Loco you'd like to see featured in a future episode of Trash to Track, please email me at the email address on screen now, and we'll have a look at getting it sent over, and who knows, it may even feature in an episode all of its own. I'm going to leave you now with Gordon running around on the dining room table. This will be a feature in the next few videos, as James's layout is in quite a messy state at the moment, as he is doing some scenery work, and obviously Gordon, not being DCC fitted, can't run around my own layout in the garage. Thanks again for watching Trash to Track. Please like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you again in the next video. Bye for now.